a Fenwick graduate. We don't get many of them around here. They always go off and make millions of dollars and never want to talk to us again.
Except for me. As for the millions of dollars.
Well, he's...
Sono poverino, come Calabrese.
But he's begged enough in terms of grants too.
Sì, sono specialista.
Okay. After, as a Calabrese, a descendant of Calabrese immigrants, he worked here, lived in Chicago area, and he went to Fenwick, graduated from Fenwick, and he went to, was it Western Illinois University?
For my undergraduate.
For his undergraduate career, and then he did so well there, he went to the University of Illinois, of which I'm a PhD in history from, so I can recommend the college, the university, but we were in different eras, different double decades.
Sono più vecchio.
Sì, è vero. And then in 1984, he went to OSU and received a PhD in French and Italian language instruction. And did you spend your whole career at San Diego?
No, 4 universities, Michigan Tech, Boise State University, University of Toledo, and then 16 years at San Diego State University.
Oh, is it true about San Diego, it being the best climate in the country?
Second best climate in the world after Cuernavaca in Mexico.
Oh, so he knows where he wants to go, and he knows where we should maybe go. He's received 58 grants in his lifetime for the total millions of dollars, and he's got another grant that he's working on this summer. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, we have to bribe President Trump because he got rid of USAID, and we got $15 million. So I'm working with the president of Ivory Coast in Africa, who's a good friend, because I'm going there on Monday, and we're going to convince President Trump to release the $15 million for another grant.
Okay, what percent does he want you to?
Whatever percent he wants,
okay,
he can have.
So, and a really important thing, I didn't know Steve, and I'm not sure why I didn't know him, but it's just that we're from different generations, I guess. But
I was in prison for a while.
I was working in the city of Chicago Heights for the mayor, so about the same time. Anyhow, we're pleased to have him as the writer of our lead article, Vedova Bianca, which is White Widows. He'll tell you all about that. It's part of our new book that came out just a few months ago, Italian Women in Chicago, Volume 2, that a number of us in the room, almost all of us in the room, contributed to in one way or another, but especially Anna and Julie Weiss. Anna, take a bow. And Frank, she literally put that book together on the page one by one. Okay, come on in. And of course there's Frank, who was the other co-editor. We're very proud of the book. It's sold more than any of our other books, and we're still pushing it. It's still our major project. And so as in connection with that, but just because of this occasion that we got to know Steve, we have Steve here today. So I'm very proud to introduce Professor Stephen Sacco.
Earlier earlier today, Dominic said there were going to be 2 people here. So we made sure that we brought 7 family members from the Sacco and Ryan family, and my Aunt Darlene, who is so dear to me. And so I walk into the room, and I'm totally shocked to see how many people that are here, but that's great. Let me just tell you something about how Dominic and I hooked up with this book. I'm a French professor by trade, but I was forced to teach Italian back in 2003 because my department lost their Italian professor, but I didn't speak Italian. So they paid for me to go to Florence and do intensive Italian, and I've been studying ever since to be able to teach elementary and intermediate Italian. So when Dominic says, "I'd like you to translate the book," I'm like, wrong guy. No, but I will do my best to do my translation. He's given me a deadline. He wanted me to do it by July 15th, but I'm going to going to Africa with a group of French teachers. So he goes, "Okay, August 15th. And then I said, "Well, that's when I'm coming back from Africa." He goes, "Okay, August 31st. So August 31st is my new deadline.
You only have to check the translations. You don't have to do the translations.
I know, but checking the translations, it's almost easier to do the translations. But then I saw all the people who are lined up, and all their Italian is stronger than mine, so it won't be that hard of an assignment. So, but I promise you, Dominic, that I will have it by August 31st,
Okay.
if not sooner.
Okay, well, we have witnesses.
Plenty of witnesses. So Dominic puts out, I think in January of 2024, he comes up with this call for papers, Italian women in Chicago. And I immediately thought of my grandmother. I'm gonna cry. And not to brag, I wrote my essay in 15 minutes. It just came out. And he calls me about an hour later. He goes, "Is this published somewhere? Can we use this?" I said, "Dominic, I just wrote it." He goes, "You just wrote it?" I said, "I'm slow at writing anything else, but for some reason, for my grandmother, it just came out." And one thing I wanted to mention is, when I look at the women in Chicago, and especially a lot of your families, you know, we think of Mother Cabrini and all the famous Italians, almost like the Duomo, the cupola in Florence. People only notice the outside of the cupola. They don't realize that the herringbone brick configuration inside, because Filippo Brunelleschi made 2 domes, one outside and one inside. The one inside holds up the one on the outside. And the one on the inside, nobody really knows about unless they know architecture. And my grandmother and your family are those bricks that basically hold up in anonymity, because my grandmother, like many of yours, worked in anonymity. They weren't like Coach Prime and had their own TV show. She worked in anonymity, taking care of 7 children at a time when my grandfather was in prison, and ran a candy store, which my cousin gave me a picture of today that we'll pass around. Please don't steal the picture, because she's going to want it back. But you can see this candy store during the Great Depression is about 3 times the height of my grandmother, and she ran it. So we're talking about St. Philomena Parish on the northwest side, where she was active among the Legion of Mary, taking care of 7 children, which was, if you knew my uncles and aunts, that's not a very easy thing. And so that's kind of like where we were at the time that I set the story that I'm going to read parts of to you because many of you may not have read it so far. But just to give you an idea, here's what came out of me within 15 minutes. And this came from Pam's mother, my Aunt Pat. She basically told me about how, as the first grandson, my grandmother took care of me. She took care of me because both my father and my mother were working. And I was 2.5 years old when she died. She died on Friday the 13th, June 13th, 1952. And she was getting ready to cross Armitage Avenue and trip to come and take care of me. And she collapsed there. She probably threw a clot like I did in 2010 when I almost died, like my father died at age 47. I'm really gonna cry. Like my uncle at age 68. We all have clot problems, and I didn't hear about it until I'm in the hospital, and my Aunt Pat says, yeah, all you Saccos, you all have clot problems. I'm thinking, whoa, good to know. So I had 2 clots in my lung, and I was there, got the last rites. And so my grandmother died, or our grandmother died, on that day, Friday the 13th, coming to take care of me. And for all of us, it's a huge loss because she would never be around in person to come to our first communions, to our confirmations, especially my confirmation, because her father, my Uncle Gene, was telling dirty jokes as he was walking me up the aisle, and I can't stop laughing, and he's giving me some more. Yeah, you getting any lately? Whispering in my ear, and the bishop is giving me the eyeball, and he's still going because he's hiding behind me. And so I get up there, and I could tell you that I measured the slaps because I was wondering, how hard is this guy going to slap me? And so everyone's getting, I get up there and kneel down. He's laughing he's not laughing right there, but as we go around to get back to the pew, he's laughing, getting me in trouble, as not only his son did when I was a child, but also my uncle in front of the bishop. So we never had my grandmother around for all of those major events, our marriages, our graduations, and I keep saying, I learned Italian, but when we went back to our home village, Miglierina, provincia di Catanzaro, about 16 miles from Catanzaro, I was viewed as an outsider. Ecco l'americano. And I'm still, even today, because I went back, ecco l'americano, because what was I speaking? I was speaking the dialect of Dante, which is the dialect of the baroni, who basically ran the feudal system all throughout Calabria. You've got the king who didn't care, Victor Emmanuel III, who didn't care about Calabria. You've got Lega Nord today, which wants to expel Calabria from the Italian peninsula. And so I'm speaking the wrong language. I'm speaking the language of the outsider. So at some point, I want to live in our Borgo, and I want to learn Calabrese. I'm gonna cry again. Because I want to be able to speak to her in Calabrese, because she didn't know Italian. There were no schools in those days. She was born in 1891. And so for my grandfather, who was a pastore di Capri, my grandmother was basically somebody who went down the hill and worked a small piece of land that belonged to the barone, who basically owned kind of like a pizza shape from Nicastro all the way to where the University of Calabria is today, in the Rende, where I got to teach for 3 years, teaching Italian American Studies. I'm going to start crying again. But here it was, that was the big part of the pizza. So it's not like Italian pizza, the square. We're talking big pizza like this, coming all the way down to Catanzaro. So here we are in the middle. She probably had about 5, maybe 10 hectares that she did with her family and other family members. On a good year, they broke even. In a bad year, you had to find other ways to eat. And as you probably know, they lived in one-room houses, which are still standing, on narrow streets. Even me with 2 knee replacements, I could jump from one balcony to the next or have coffee with my neighbor across the way. And so that's the way it is. If you've ever read Carlo Levi's Cristo si è fermato a Eboli,
Yes.
Christ stopped at Eboli. Eboli is a town maybe about 120 miles to the north. And people said that in Lucania, which is modern Basilicata. And Carlo Levi was a doctor who Mussolini exiled to a little village, 2 villages, between 1935 and 1936. These are people who believed that Christ abandoned them, that Christ stopped slightly south of Naples. And so here you've got going one way for Basilicata, and then we've got Calabria coming this way. So we're talking, for the most part, if you saw the movie, we're talking about one-room houses with a fireplace and with animals in the house. So most likely with my grandfather when he got married, and on April 17th, 1913, they had goats in the house, and with all the smell of the goats, as you can imagine. When you had children, you had to have them in a crib hanging above from the ceiling, because pigs who were allowed in the house or goats would be chowing down on the kid. So imagine you're managing children and you're managing goats, and you're going down that hill in order to get to your little patch of farm and the Amato River to go get your water. And if you've ever driven from Catanzaro to Miglierina, and it was founded during the time of when you had the Normans, the Arabs, the Byzantines. No one ever attacked that village. Why? Because when you drive up it, you got to drive in second gear for about 16 miles to get to it. Because once you get to the top, you can see the Tyrrhenian Sea on one side and the Ionian Sea on the other. And no one ever robbed Miglierina, because we got some tough Calabreses there, but because there wasn't anything there to rob. So they stayed on the coast and robbed all the coastal cities, while they were allowed to live pretty free from the Byzantines and from the Arabs. You know, Catanzaro is an Arabic word that my son taught me, because he got his master's at Georgetown in Arabic. I'm gonna start crying again. And he said, "Dad, that's Al-Catanzar." I said, okay. So Catanzaro comes from Al-Catanzar, from the Arabic influence, since Catanzaro is right on the coast. So here we are going back to my grandmother, because remember, when we tell stories in Calabrians, Calabrese, as we would just simply say on the west side of Chicago, because I grew up on Grand and Pulaski, 3600 west, 1200 north. And they never said Calabrese or Calabrese, it's Calabrese, both singular and plural. But now I forgot what I was going to say. But what was I? Oh, when we tell stories in English, we normally go from point A to point B, straight line. Okay? When we tell stories among us, it kind of goes like this. So you're going to see me going back and forth, you know, just not going in one direction, but going all over the place. So back to my grandmother. She is born 1 year after my grandfather, and they get married in 1913, right after he comes back from the La Guerra Italo-Turca, the Italian-Turkish War of 1911 and 1912. Italy decided, hey, everybody else has got colonies. We can't take Tunisia, which is close by. It's only 30 minutes by plane from Tunis to Nicastro, or La Mezzia Terme, that it's called now. And the French already took it. So The Italians and Victor Emmanuel III goes after Libya and Benghazi. We know Benghazi for other historical things going on in the United States. That's where my grandfather was stationed. So we don't know, because Italian military records are so hard to find, whether he volunteered to get out of Miglierina and doing goats, or did he get drafted? So he's the only Sacco, other than me and my son Richard, who speak Italian, because he had to learn Italian to get trained and to be serving in the Italian army. He didn't go to school either, but he had a PhD in forties, or a PhD in being clever is probably the best way to translate that.
Common sense.
So
Common sense too.
yeah, PhD in common sense, forbitia. And Furbo is probably could have been his middle name. So he goes, he gets shot in the ankle, he comes back, marries my sainted grandmother, because she is a saint. Because it's not only who the church, declares, but saints are just like the women of Chicago. Those who work on the inner side of the Dome of Florence, they're saints too, okay? Even though I'm not allowed to, create saints, but they are saints in my mind. They come back, and then in 1914, he decides to go to America, to Long Branch, New Jersey, because every Italian in Long Branch, New Jersey, because I presented there, they're all our relatives. They all come from Miglierina, or close by, Serra Stretta, Marcellinara, all the neighboring villages to our Borgo, or our village. They say, oh yeah. So he came, and normally Italians had to work for 6 years saving up money in order to get a business. He started a business immediately. So my Uncle Gene told me, yeah, he was the tax collector for the city, and he ran off with all the tax collections. So I did research on that, because people didn't pay money. They'd say, okay, here's a goat, here's 3 round things of cheese, or whatever. He would have had to spend a lot of time translating that into dough, into money. But when I went back and talked to the mayor in 2023, they said, Cesare di Sacco, sì, certo. Yeah, the story is 107 years old that he ran off with the tax collections by himself, okay? And he continued in America with his forbitia, his PhD in common sense. So when I do grant workshops, I always tell the story, and I say, I can assure you that I get my grant money legally and above board, and I will help you do the same. But they love the story. So at some point, being an ethnographer, somebody who studies learning phenomenon and trying to come up with triangulation, the triangulation came from the fact that the mayor and the people who were sitting with me in the town square all said, oh yeah, we all know him. Like, why are you asking us this question? And then they said, you know Cesare Sacco, who was born in 1792, and he was a brigante? I'll show you where his prison is. The prison's still there. And I'm like, there's another Cesare Sacco, and I saw it in the book, because Miglierina has its own book, its own history. He was a piccolo brigante, because you all know that briganti normally got their heads chopped off and put on a spike in order to scare away future briganti. Because I can tell you, if we had briganti in Chicago, especially on the west side, me, Herb, Gene, Pam, Anthony, all my cousins, we would have been briganti. We probably would have had to select our hoods, and okay, you get Central Park, you get Lawndale, I'll take Monticello. We would probably have been briganti. So he had to have been a piccolo brigante, because he was in jail, okay? But it's in the book, and I'm reading this on the plane coming home, and I start yelling out, my grandfather was a brigante. And all these people are looking at me. I'm reading it right there. Cesare Sacco, like page 88, Brigante. When they did the Book of Souls, could tell you in the church what happened every year, how many different people, how many different professions, and all that type of information, which you can get today from your parishes in Calabria. But you got to pay, nothing's free. Even the priest wants his, piccolo tangente. But you can go there and find your family records for a particular year, like 1834, and it will tell you how many shepherds, how many police officers, how many farmers, etc., etc. And so it had one category, brigante, and it would have been better if there were maybe 3 briganti, but there's only 1 brigante, and that was Cesare Sacco. On my grandmother's side are bishops, priests, but no briganti. So
Tutti opposite.
you can
Just the opposite.
see l'opposto. So he goes, and he was aboard the Taormina, or Taormina, which the Germans sank in 1915. He goes to New York, but knowing him, because he always had la bella figura, I doubt if he was like in Titanic down and, with the poor people and everybody throwing up. He was probably going first class. He gets to New York and then immediately goes to Long Branch, New Jersey, which you can see right from the beaches there, you can see the Statue of Liberty. In 1917, he moves to Pittsburgh, and I'm giving you a little background here because in order to understand my grandmother and what she went through, you have to understand him. He was drafted by the American Army, and he got out, even though hardly anyone got a draft deferment in World War I. He got out because he's taking care of his family financially. He didn't tell them that the family is back in Italy. So by 1920, he's in Chicago, and there are other Miglierinesi who were in Chicago, and they report back to the Borgo that Cesare now has an Irish girlfriend, and he's getting ready to start a new family. Okay? My grandmother, who now has a 6-year-old daughter that my grandfather hasn't seen, gets a loan, comes to Chicago. That's why when you look at the concept of Vedova Bianca, white widow, probably 1 out of 1,000 got rid of that title. My grandmother, our grandmother, did that. Normally, they wore black for the rest of their lives. They weren't allowed to get married, and their husbands in Australia, Argentina, Canada, wherever, could basically have another family. She comes back and she decides to reconnect with the real family. Kicks the Irish woman out. I mean, this is a small woman, as you can see on the first page of the book, of my article. She's a very small woman and very quiet, and she basically recaptured the family scene. So after that, my Uncle Landy is born, my father's born in 1923, my Uncle Gene in 1925, all the way down to my Uncle Tony, who was born in 1934. And my dear Uncle Chris, who was born in 1932 and just passed. I never cry like this at conferences. I don't know what and so she comes back, and she has 7 children, and then in the middle of the Great Depression, when my grandfather had a car, and I had that confirmed because the Chicago Tribune has an article about him getting in an accident with my 8-year-old father at the time. So there, I've got confirmation, trying to get triangulation to make sure that I'm not myth-making. And I found out that my Uncle Gene, I would have naturally thought he would have been a myth maker. Not at all. He was telling the truth, at least to me, every possible time, along with, my mother and also my Aunt Pat, Pam's mother. So they open a candy store, But my grandfather is running a little gig on the side with his best friend, Antonio Torquia. And he and Antonio decide to sell life insurance. Imagine this, in the Great Depression. They're selling life insurance and they're keeping the premiums. They're not turning them in. So the Carabinieri couldn't catch him, even though Grandma Josephine had to respond to the knocks on the door. Where's your husband? You got to pay for this. And she's, I have no idea where he's at. And so he gets sentenced to prison for 4 months. I got that confirmed. And she's running the candy store alone and also raising 7 children. And always very, very quiet. Except for even in situations when my grandfather got released and Antonio Torquia got released, one furbo is not going to allow the other furbo to live happily. One day, my grandfather opens up a phone bill with $1,000. This is like 1934. $1,000 phone, long distance phone charges. Antonio would come over to the house. My grandmother would be cooking, and he'd get on the phone calling back to Italy, to Calabria, and all of a sudden my grandfather sees that, and imagine $1,000 in 1934 is probably like $50,000 today, and they get in a knife fight. In my book, Growing Up Calabrese, which you can get on Amazon, the chapter is called Knife Fight in the Kitchen. And it's told to me by my Uncle Gene. And I'm going to start crying again if I start thinking about him. Here they are with their stilettos. But it's kind of like if you watch Sanford and Son, how they were.
Yeah.
So here they are. No one's even close enough to even get, you could put 3 people in between, but they're. And so my grandmother didn't say a word. Our grandmother didn't say a word. She grabs them by the earlobes, like the good Dominican nuns at my military school, escorted them out of the kitchen, didn't say anything, just escorted them to the door, and they realized they needed to go. The other time where she showed her power with Cesare, our grandfather, is the famous story of messing with her sauce. You know how on Sundays at our house with Uncle Landy, who was a great cook, you'd hear the opera. I know this sounds so stereotypical. You got the opera, you got the windows, the French windows that are all clouded up. He's starting at 6 o'clock. It's going to take him 4, 5, 6 hours for that sauce, which I would kill for. In San Diego, ain't no sauce like that. It's gringo sauce. So even at Italian restaurants, it's gringo sauce. So here she is making her sauce, and no one ever dared to go to Uncle Landy's and, put in some pepper, salt, or more onions or whatever. All the boys, Gene, Carmy, my father, Landy, my uncle, they're all messing with the sauce, okay? Adding this, and then they're making nasty comments. So what does Grandma Josephine do? She takes her meat cleaver, and I don't think she ever did Little League, but she had the most incredible arm, at least in this particular case. She whips it at my grandfather. It hits the wall an inch away from his ear, okay? She was probably aiming for the forehead, but she got the ear. That's still pretty good. And again, no words were said. They left the kitchen, and that was it. So this is the kind of strength that we have with all of our grandmothers and great-grandmothers, our aunts, that doesn't, you're never going to be on the outside of the cupola of Florence, but that ain't going to exist without the interior portion that holds it up in anonymity, working hard without, again, ever looking for any kind of recognition. And basically, that's what I wanted to share with you. It's not just my or our grandmother, but it's all of your relatives who fit that same mold. And when you think about the children that she raised, even though she only lived to be 60, and I put 59, and Pam found like 3 mistakes in there. And you know, I apologize because I'm only like the 6th best storyteller in my family. There's 2 or 3 right over there. I don't want to be pointing too closely, who are way better storytellers than me. But she found mistakes. Sorry, Dominic.
Oh.
There's a couple mistakes in there. If you have a 2nd edition, I promise, like the 3rd one, if you reprint it because there's so many copies sold, then I promise to change the mistakes that my cousin found.
Well, that's fine. Maybe we'll interview them all together and have a volume 3.
They could be. It could be volume 3 just with the Saccos. So, the one thing I wanted to end with before we offer some time for questions is that March 2020, I was invited to come and to teach at the University of Calabria. I'm going to start crying now. The University of Calabria was founded in 1972, 52 years after my grandmother left and never came back. So there were no universities. Probably the closest university was in Naples or maybe in Bari. And they asked me to teach Italian American studies. And I'm not qualified. I'm a French teacher. And the week before I went, Italia canceled the flight and we had COVID. And I thought, this is my one dream to basically honor my grandparents by teaching the University of Calabria, which has a 20% acceptance rate. That's almost the same as Harvard's, 20%. I never would have gotten in because I sucked on the ACT and all those tests. I was, good in the classroom, but, like Pete Rose, I wasn't fast, but, have a heart. So all of a sudden they called me back and said, would you want to do it on Zoom? I said, what's Zoom? I didn't know what Zoom was yet. So I got to teach for 3 years to these students who at first I thought were going to be poorer than me, poorer than kids on the west side of Chicago, because we all came from, working class families. These are all rich kids. And I'm asking them, how is it that you're rich? Yeah, I've got property on the beach. If you ever want to, my father can give you a portion on the beach. I'm thinking, how the hell do they have these rich Calabrese kids? What I didn't know at the time, and what many of us don't know, is that their grandparents were birds of passage. Has anyone heard of that concept? Birds of passage? Me and my students wrote the first book on birds of passage. Here's what happened. They all went to New Jersey and started up grocery store chains. They all became rich, whether they were in Argentina, whether they were in Canada, Australia, and then they said, the hell with this, I'm coming back to my village. One of my students told me the story of her father coming back with a 1957 Cadillac. Remember what that looked like? He has it on the boat. He takes it off the port. He's able to get it to the town square, but there ain't no streets that he can drive down. So the mayor added it to the town square so that it's like, here's basically our trophy of success. When we're told by Lega Nord, that right-wing political party, that Calabrese are lazy, they're no good, they're stupid. That's why they want to get rid of us, okay? And in my book, I write some things that I really can't repeat in public about Lega Nord, which is still in charge of Italy. None of us has ever met a lazy Southern Italian, okay? So these kids are all children of birds of passage. And so I was expected to give them a huge final exam that would be 4 hours long. Italian universities, they love to give exams. My poor students would have some kind of exam every 2 weeks. I said, yo, we ain't doing that. Okay, and I taught the class in English because they're all getting their master's degrees in English. So I said, yo, we ain't doing that. What would you guys like to do instead of an exam? They were thinking around. I said, how about, here's what I see as a theme for all of you. All of you come from families of birds of passage. Let's write a book with 24 chapters, 24 students, actually 23 students and one mother. One mother published. So in my career, I published with 54 students and 2 mothers, both Calabrese. None of these students were interested in their grandparents or their uncle and aunt's history. That's why when I came in 2023 to meet them, their grandparents, their parents, everybody was there. People would come up and say, see that picture in the book? That's me 50 years ago. They were crying, I was crying, because here we are in this museum in Rende, the Centro Culturale, and right next door is a bed in a bedroom that looks almost exactly the one that I imagined my grandparents having when they were in Miglierina. And so we spent the whole class doing that because they didn't want to hear my stories. You know, I was talking about, you know, growing up Calabrese, and they liked the book and stuff. But all of a sudden, their families start writing to me and telling me thank you, because when a mother dies, when a grandmother dies, a library disappears. And so they resurrected these stories and they published them in better English than mine. And we took it to Rubbettino, the major publisher in southern Italy, and they published it. And I didn't write it, I just wrote the foreword and then read their articles and got everything in good shape. But these kids got their very first publication because they all want to go for their PhDs. Why was I going to give them another test? They all count on their resumes that article in Calabrian Voices. Stories from the current generation is the name of the book. I'm sorry I didn't bring it with me. And those are the best students I've ever had, and it's the best time teaching. And I did it because I wanted to honor my grandparents. Because as I told them, it was my first presentation in Italian, because my Italian sucks. And I've got it taped if anybody wants to see it. I said, here are my accomplishments, and I'm not going to go into them. So what I'm most proud of is that I'm the grandson of contadini Calabrese. And I started crying. And my students started coming up and trying to get me to stop ruining the presentation. Parents started coming up. I finally got myself together and just talked about our book and, you know, and introducing all the students to everybody. And we had university officials there, all in this cultural center. And I got to meet them. I thought I was just going to meet my students. I didn't realize I was going to meet their parents and grandparents. And it was I didn't realize the impact that it was going to have on them. I just wanted them, I didn't want to get in trouble for not doing an end of course activity. But I didn't think that the book was going to make that much of an impact. It's in every airport in the South, bookstores, and I'm just so proud of those kids, and I'm in touch with them on a regular basis, and they know that they can call me anytime, or Zoom, now that I know Zoom, but I have to have them do the Zoom invite because I'm a techno-idiota, and so they call and say, hey, I need help with choosing graduate programs. And I'll say, have you ever thought about going outside of Calabria? Go to Canada, go to the United States, come to San Diego State, come live with us. And so I'm trying to help and guide them to different directions and telling them that as a consultant, because I retired at age 61, started my own consulting company because I was born and raised in a family business. And I wanted to honor my father, who had that business for 23 years before he died when I was 18 years old. And so I keep telling them, as a consultant, what makes me qualified to be a consultant in Africa? I'll be going twice in the next 2 or 3 months because I'm a French teacher. I know about language, I know about culture, and I've got a doctorate in Sacco-nomics from, because here I wanted to play with Herbie and Anthony and Gene and Pam when they came over. The old man forced me to ride in the truck. And what's in the truck? There ain't no, there's no TV, there's no phone, there's no games. I'm having to pay attention. And here's the old man speaking Cantonese. I know he spoke a modicum of 5 languages because that's what he felt was necessary for customer intimacy. And I realized that he customized services and products whenever he could. When he screwed up, he owned up and always followed up to make sure that they were happy. That's the only way. When you don't manufacture anything, you buy wholesale and sell retail, you can't stay in business for very long. Now with Waxy is a company that does what he did, but they're from Maine all the way to San Diego. So if he had lived, he died at age 47, probably in 5 years, he would have had to choose something else as his profession. So let me stop there before I do any more crying and leave it open for questions for you. And let me pass around. Please give this back because I'll have to answer to Pam if I don't get the picture back. But that's my grandmother's candy store. Yes, sir.
Mr. Sacco, I'm gobsmacked, as the Brits would say, that it took you a quarter of an hour to write that magnificent story. Of all the stories in the book, and they're all written, people talking about their own experiences, they're all from the heart. But the language you use and the skill you wrote that with, I'm a writer, and it would probably take me 5 or 6 rewrites to even approach that.
Well, if I had
That
6
was
rewrites,
magnificent.
I wouldn't have made the mistakes that Pam
No, it was magnificently written. Really, really a wonderful story. Thank you for that.
It's all because of my father
Thanks.
and my family.
It came through big time.
Because everything I've done in my life, I do for my father because he didn't have a chance to live this full life. All the mistakes, they're on me. But everything I've ever accomplished is because of him.
I think everybody in this room is still trying to please their parents and their grandparents. It's part of our DNA.
I hope, I get to go to heaven to see him.
I'm sure you will.
I was just
Yes, ma'am.
picture, and I enjoyed your presentation. It was wonderful. And where was your grandmother's store? Whereabouts was it?
I'm not sure.
On the south side.
Okay, they have one on, but did she have one on the north side? See, there's another mistake.
Well, because Uncle Andy's so little, and they hadn't moved over to the west side yet, they were still on the south side.
St. Kevin's Parish.
Yeah.
If you know St. Kevin's
Like all
Parish.
the Torrance and whatever.
See, she found yet another mistake. Sorry, Pam.
Yeah.
Dominic, we definitely have to go into the second edition because Pam just found another mistake I put in there.
Okay, well,
She should be a professional editor, actually.
yeah, well, we can always use more volunteers.
Any other questions?
Brandon Pulaski.
Yeah, Grandin Pulaski is, we say that because Jimmy's is
Yeah.
one of our favorite hot dog stand.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. See, you hear that?
I think
No,
my grandmother was good friends with your grandmother. Her name was, my grandmother used to talk about Josephine Sacco all the time. My grandmother's name was Josephine Bonafetti. I don't know if you know that name.
No, I don't.
Oh, but she, growing up, you know, the Sacco family, so there's gotta be Josephine Sacco.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
But-
that they were friends.
But notice,
My dad had a Italian food store in the, Chicago and Lawndale.
Okay.
They all grew up on the west side, and my grandmother was from, they grew up, I believe they came from Sicily, and they, ended up
and was
downtown Chicago.
OLA your parish like it was
Oh,
for
my-
us?
It was, where my dad's store was.
Okay.
And my grandmother, Josephine was from OLA. My grandfather and grandmother got married there.
Yeah. Our Lady of the Angels, for
Yeah.
those of you who know. And I was supposed to be in first grade there
Oh,
in 1958.
yeah.
But they had too long of a list, and my father sent me to military school. And I always blame Herbie and my cousins because my father, knew I was going to get in trouble. But Herbie was pretty good when he was 6 years old. But one thing I wanted to mention about your grandmother and mine, look at what they had to sacrifice, not only in language, but my grandmother's name is not Josephine Sacco, it's Giuseppina Cittadino. So no Italian takes their husband's name, not even today. So she has to come and become Josephine, and not even Giuseppina, and she's got to be Sacco instead of Cittadino. Just even in names, they had to sacrifice a lot.
Well, her maiden name was Bruno.
We know, you know what, that's a common name.
Yeah.
We know, but we had,
Uh-oh.
one of our aunts married a Bruno. Her first husband was a Bruno. And that's Dolores's father.
That's gotta be.
Bruno.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Isn't it something? And they lived next, but they didn't live over there at the time though, I don't think. But they lived next door. It's a long story.
Yeah, we'll
but-
talk later.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
Dolores was our Grandma Josephine's first grandchild.
Yeah.
Is there any way to expand your essay into a family history that brings in all the other
Growing Up
characters?
Calabrese has a lot of that in there. That was my first book that I wrote in, 2021
Okay.
or something.
Maybe they should be repackaged. or
Yeah,
something.
actually I should but I'd want to write it with one of my family members.
Yeah.
And especially have Pam edit it before we send it to publication.
Another thing about since you taught French and Italian,
Then they moved over here.
how do you compare the two languages and cultures in your mind?
Well, I also speak Spanish, Portuguese, German, Swedish, and Vietnamese.
Okay, well,
Because
that gives you even more
I got to be good at
perspective.
something. I suck in math and science, couldn't be an engineer. And our 3 children, I wanted them to take after their mother, who's a chemical engineer. They took after me for languages. And they all suck at math and science like me. But, talking about the cultures, French was my very first. And my grandfather yelled at me, "Why are you taking Francese?" I said, "Because they don't offer Italian at Fenwick." Now, Fenwick offers Italian. I would have taken Italian back then. But it's their fault because they wanted us to be American. And so they spoke dialect among each other, which we picked up, words and stuff. We still say, "Look at that mama look." Or that guy's a stunad. That guy, we still do that in our language. But they refused to teach us Calabrese. I wanted to be like Mitch, my cousin Mitch, who is bilingual Polish and American. I never got to learn like Mitch a second language at birth. So I had to learn all my languages. I've studied 34 altogether as an adult, which is the wrong time to learn unless you're living in the country. That's why I want to go for like 3 months to Miglierina, pay somebody to teach me how to speak Calabrese. So again, so I can speak to my grandmother.
Beautiful language.
Certo. Certo.
Certo.
Certo. Yeah, actually, Calabrese reminds me a lot of Portuguese. Yeah. Eu sonho americano
Yeah.
with the Brazilian
Depends on
accent.
what part of Calabria you are.
Well-
Set the town.
The interesting thing, I got a $200,000 grant from a company to create a Calabrese dialect. Then I found out there's 200 plus. Which one are you going to choose?
Yeah, especially if you go on Reggio Calabria, because there's so many.
So our town, which is maybe, put it this way, the next village, Amato, they speak Amatese, which is only 60% overlap, even though it's 2 miles away. And so what are you going to be, so if you get towards Rende, in northern Calabria, it starts to become a Napolitano dialect, where ours all comes from Siciliano, they would say Siciliano.
If you go to Reggio Calabria, it's like a Sicilian.
Exactly. Well, so is ours in a lot. I look at the comparison, and I see a lot. You can tell that it derives. But we've got French, we've got Arabic, we've got Greek. You've heard of Greco, which is a Greek dialect from ancient Greece that's still spoken in the Aspromonte region between Miglierina and Reggio di Calabria. And so all of it, and then we had the pandemic, and then the person that I wrote it with wanted to do it in her dialect near Reggio di Calabria, but then she lives in Australia, and then she didn't want to come during the pandemic, so we end up losing $200,000.
But you still didn't answer the question about the French versus the Italian.
Call me President Trump.
Okay.
Just kidding.
You
So,
just
there's,
summarize, you don't have to go into
the cultures are so similar in the way we love literature, the way we love art and music, but obviously Italians and the French have different geopolitical goals. And so, but when it comes to literature, France has won the most Nobel Prizes for literature, but Italy comes in I think 4th or 5th.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
We're about the same age. I was born in 1940, and I grew up on Taylor Street, where we predominantly
Great lemon ice.
Yeah.
Great lemon ice, and my father bought all my clothes there.
But what it is, both my parents, one family came from Calabria, the other from Sicily, and everybody, kids I'm growing up with, all our parents spoke Italian. They did not want us to speak Italian because culturally at the time, if you're born in America, other Americans will accept you if you come from Europe with an accent. But if you're born here, you have to speak like an American, okay? And the way to do it is just speak English all the time, which is really what happened.
Yeah, exactly.
And I agree with you, and my grandmothers were a big influence on me, both of them.
Yeah, because we had a second grandmother, we call Grandma Lucy, and she's dear and to our heart. I could write a book just about her.
And I have a comment to his here about growing up. So when my grandfather came here, the other thing is he did not. The kids spoke Italian, but he moved in neighborhoods that weren't necessarily predominantly Italian.
Right.
So they moved from the south side to Armitage and Pulaski because there's a lot of Germans, a lot of, you know what I mean? He wanted them to be integrated into the system, although they did speak the dialect at home.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
Because she couldn't speak English.
I got to take my uncles
Yeah.
to their native village in 2001. And in Rome, we lost our rental car, and here I'm arguing with them, and Uncle Chris is smoking a cigar. Uncle Tony is going, "Hurry up! I want to get down there." And so we get down and we find family, and they started speaking Calabrese, Miglierina. And I'm like, I had no idea that they could speak that, or that they remembered at that particular point. And I'm the outsider at that point because I can't speak their dialect, and I'm speaking Italian,
Yeah.
and which is the outsider language.
Frank, you must have a question. I'll put you on the spot.
Italian, because they knew you.
So the entire time you were teaching, at the university, it was on Zoom from here.
Yeah.
Oh, so you were never actually like.
I was never there until I came to meet the family and meet the students. Yeah. And throughout my career, I taught French except for the last 10 years where I taught nothing but Italian.
No, you're right.
So I followed you to New York and to New Jersey and then to Pennsylvania. How did you get to Chicago?
I think, I don't know if you guys know, but for some reason, a lot of Italians in Chicago,
Yeah.
probably some of his villager friends knew other people from our village and decided to go there.
So
I
when did
really
your
don't know.
family come to Chicago?
I think they came in like 1920.
Yeah,
Yeah, and they set
I
up-
missed something from New York, New
Yeah.
Jersey, and Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
And
so New York just getting off the boat, going immediately to Long Branch, so they never had to go to Little Italy and eat Lombardi's pizza, the oldest pizzeria in the United States. Why he decided to go to Pittsburgh, I don't know, and why Chicago, I can only guess. Maybe my cousins know.
I don't know that unless you got run out of town, I don't know.
That could be.
Well, when usually you have to get off at Ellis Island, you had to be sponsored here.
Yeah, he was sponsored by
So they
people
were
in Long
sponsored by
Branch.
somebody in New Jersey. you know, like-
He was sponsored by somebody in Long Branch.
Now,
I'd like to find out who that was and who their grandson is, so I can talk. But they just said,
Look at the
we're all.
records, and if they came in at Ellis Island, but
You have theirs right.
Yeah, he went to Ellis Island, but immediately went to Long Branch, New Jersey.
So like you said, there had to be somebody there that,
Yeah.
from the town, from somebody that he knew or that,
that you could work.
Yeah.
Steve, are you related to any of the post-World War II migrants from Calabria who are so prominent here in Chicago now?
Probably not, but in our village of 800 people, the mayor said you're related to everybody.
Yep.
But I don't know of any family post-World War II that are family
You
members.
recognize that guy? The saint.
Uh-huh. Saint Francesco di Paola.
Okay, now in
That's our
second
Calabrian saint.
second week of August,
I have it right here.
there'll be 3,000 people here
Yeah.
to celebrate that. It's the biggest festival, the most best attended event that takes place on the grounds here.
Is that San Francesco di Paola? Okay.
So let's just fish. Let's just.
So our grandfather, grandfather and grandmother had pictures of Saint Francis of Paola, along with the Virgin and everybody and other saints, but that was the key one, obviously. That was in our
Most
house.
famous saint.
Yeah.
That's why my name is Francesco.
And we have a Francesco who became Chicutz,
Chicutz, yeah.
and he went to Argentina.
Chicutz.
Yeah, so I don't know if Pam and Herbie, you guys know, but we have family in on Facebook in every Latin American country, from Argentina to Colombia, not in Central America. And you can always tell because it says, where are you from? And it says Miglierina. So it's either Torquia, Cittadino, Sacco, or one of the 6 or 7 key names that go back to the 1660s. And then you see Miglierina there, so you know they're relatives. And we write all the time. But none of them are interested in their family roots, because for Argentina, our uncle Francesco, or Chicutz, he was the first one to go. So I have his birth certificate and I have this picture, and they say, I don't do family tree stuff. So I've never sent them a copy ever. But we still talk about, today is Argentina's national holiday, and so we talk about that. And
Yeah.
so family in Uruguay, Paraguay, Argentina, Chile, Peru, all those countries, we have family.
Yeah. Well, that's Mussolini's empire. It would have been Mussolini's empire.
It could be. And when Mussolini's representative came for the Chicago World's Fair, I don't know what my grandfather or grandmother's political feelings were at the time, because there were so many who honored, the glory of Mussolini. So I don't know if he was anti-Mussolini or pro.
The left wing dropped leaflets on the crowd from an airplane asking about Balbo's victims. Well, any other questions? It's certainly been very stimulating, and you're a fantastic presenter. Thank you very
I've got
much.
business cards if anybody wants. Thank you so much, Dominic. It was a real honor.
Yes.